we are here, united, because we are convinced that here we can start a new conversation. Open hearts to close divide, solidarity for peace and prosperity. And as you know, the Women's Forum really works to put the voice, the vision, and the added value of women in all the topics where we can contribute to create a more inclusive world. Because the world, it's not doing in the right direction. We face protectionism, we face protest against globalization, we face populism, protectionism again. What can the Bretton Woods institution still do? Have they been reinvented? Have they been to be reshaped to create a new, in maybe more inclusive multilateralism?
Thank you, Chiara. That's a huge, big topic, and one that I would like to bring down to the level of our day-to-day life. The IMF, like the World Bank, like the United Nations, were set up 75 years ago to replace war with peace, to replace chaos with stability, and to replace need with prosperity. Those were the key missions of those institutions, the World Bank focusing on development, and us being the sort of lender of last resort and the policy advice givers to all the countries that were members. So that's what we do, and that's what our mission is. Ever since I've been the leader of that institution, I have tried to not only use the brain that all my economists have, not only use the wallet that the member countries are entrusting with us to help countries in needs, but also to open the heart that all of us have. Because whenever we do study a country and give policy advice, whenever we put in place a program when the country is in trouble, whenever we give technical assistance, I always insist that the teams actually look at the people behind the numbers, at the poor who are not seen, at those who have no voice. And it might sound like a nice slogan, and it might sound like me paying lip service, but I can assure you that given the level of resistance that I have encountered in the board, not anymore, by the way, and the level of resistance that some of my strong-minded economists have gently opposed, it is not just lip service. It appears in the work that we do, it appears in the financing that we put in place, it appears in the conditionalities that we have. And depending on how we frame things, it can actually have an impact, more so than even I had anticipated. I'll give you one example. Violence against women. We've seen some testimony on the film. I'm very concerned about what we're seeing at the moment. The increase of domestic violence, the increase of feminicide around the world, particularly in this part of the world, actually. And I can assure you that it's not without relationship with the economy. And I had not suspected the impact that it had. But when in Jamaica, for instance, we put in place a program in order to help the Jamaican people and the Jamaican economy to just survive the massive debt burden that they were under and restore some fiscal stability and discipline in the banking sector, which went through debt restructuring and all the tools that we can use in those situations. I had no idea that by improving the economic situation, by the creation of more jobs than there were, and by the hope that I think was rising as a result, the numbers on crimes would begin to decline. It's not a done deal. It's not mission accomplished. And any woman, any person, but any woman in particular who dies as a result of domestic violence or otherwise, is still in our face to remind us that nobody is up for a beating. Caring is not about beating. I've heard that from women's group that I discuss with in any country that I visit. And there are countries where I've heard women say to me, if I'm not beaten up now and again, it's probably that my husband doesn't love me. It happens, I'm sorry to say. Caring is about loving. Caring is about stroking. Caring is about kissing, not about beating. But I had no idea that the economic improvements would actually have an impact on those situations. So it's far away from the Bretton Woods institutions. It's far away from the work that we do concerning stability, concerning exchange rate, concerning fiscal position, concerning debt management. But it has an impact on everybody's life when it works. And that's what gives all of us the energy and the drive to just keep at it. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of time. Culture does not change easily. I was talking to a group of you members earlier this morning in Japan, where yet the Prime Minister wanted to change things and wants to change things and include more women in the workforce and empower women. The culture is hard to break. And while 1 million jobs more have been created and opened for women, there are still many women who simply do not access financing, do not access the job market in a country as civilized as Japan because of cultural reasons. One more thing that I just want to mention. I'm a grandmother, and I want to make sure that my grandchildren and the girls do not face a world where somebody is going to dispose of themselves, where they will not have the right to choose what education they get, what marriage they have, when they have children. And I'm very concerned that we are seeing in many corners of the world, including the most unlikely ones, we're seeing regression. We're seeing yet discriminations. And it's a matter for women and men alike to make sure that the opportunities, the inclusion, the fight against inequality is actually on the top of our agenda. Not just in speeches, but in real life as well. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Christine. You reminded how important is also the economic position of women, the leadership of women in the governance in companies. We just had a very interesting and very productive CEO champion this morning, where we really push CEOs to promote women in leadership. You know better than us, McKinsey is one of our partners, that we are just losing the opportunity to have $28 trillion in annual growth with more diversity, or at least stronger diversity, and we are losing the opportunity to create 240 new jobs for men and women in next year. This is just not impossible when you see the situation of the world who needs growth and who needs equalities. What could be the role of governments, of institutions as the Bretton Woods Institution, the World Bank, the IMF, and so on, to foster the leadership of women in the governance and to give trust also to the system, that maybe to assure that it's all these challenges we tackle it in the right way?
Yeah, that's what I call the economic no-brainer. Because whatever country, from the US to Saudi Arabia and India and everything in between, including women, and I'm not even saying closing the participation gap, because I think that's an illusion, but certainly closing the wage gap, that's for sure, is an economic no-brainer, because you do three things actually. You increase the size of the economy mathematically, and actually more so because the complementarity between men and women increases the productivity, and therefore it's a plus or an add-on, if you will, to the mathematical pure increase as a result of additional workforce. Second, you just mathematically as well reduce the inequality. Think about it. More women paid at the right wage, you reduce mathematically the inequalities. Not to say that there are not other inequalities that have to be tackled, but you reduce them. And by the same token, you increase the productivity. And if you increase productivity, normally, in any normally constituted companies, unless they want to increase margins by an unreasonable amount, normally productivity finds its way into wages, not just the wages of women, but the wages of all employees in a company. So it's a triple whammy as a result of empowering women and including them in the economy. So what we do is, well, two things. One is we're not alone. We work together with other institutions. The World Bank is very active. The OECD is very active. The UN, whose woman leader has arrived, and I salute you and all the work that you do. Thank you so much. So we're all in this together. And I think that all of us, dedicated as we are to those improvements, either in terms of additional trade, less inequality, more productivity, larger economies that can actually do things like spending money on health, education, and all the rest of it, we use the tools that we have. The World Bank has produced recently a fascinating study. It's actually an update of what they had done 5 years ago, that determines that of the 189 countries that we have in our membership, over 150 have in their constitution or in their legal system discrimination against women. And it ranges from professions that are not accessible to women, to collaterals that women cannot bring into their financial equation because they do not have access to property and to title to land, to unequal succession rights, where the brothers are getting more than the sisters, to the authorization that is required for women to leave a particular country. And you just go on and on. I think what we typically do on the basis of that great study that was produced by the World Bank is, when we put in place a financial program with the country, discuss with the authorities, what's the problem? Why don't you have more women? What is the issue? What budget can you allocate to improving their position? Just as a matter of example, for instance, India, which is a country having many issues when it comes to women's access to work, to equality, and to finance. We very strongly encouraged the Indian authorities to allocate budget to transportation. Now, you might think this is pretty far away from women empowerment, but it is not. Because if there is no safe transportation with identifiable space where women are protected and feel secure in order to go to work, then many of them just discount work because they want to save their life. It's as bad as that. So I'm not suggesting that all countries are fine, and that one is not. Every country can just do a little bit of introspection and figure out what is wrong and what can be fixed. So we do that when we do programs, we do that when we give policy advice, and the women's contribution to the economy is something that was not explored by the IMF in great depth before I arrived. We now have a body of study and work that we do. I raise my voice as often as I can, and in real life, down to the budget lines, we encourage countries to do gender budgeting. Now, somebody said to me once, oh, gender budgeting, that's easy. I have a woman deputy secretary. She's in charge of women's equality. I said, no, not what I mean. Gender budgeting is far more complicated than just appointing somebody, however authoritative that person is. It means drilling down with each and every ministry that you have in the cabinet, what in the budget application is going to be helpful to women, and identifying that so that when the budget is presented to the Prime Minister, to the President, or then to Parliament eventually, you can say, this is what we're doing for women. This is how we think that there will be output or not, and over which period of time. So it's all about not just what we say, but also what we do wherever we are.
Christine, I know that you're also very concerned about another important issue. We are living in a disrupted world where 60% of jobs will be transformed very quickly. And a study of the IMF just demonstrated that 180 million of work of women can be at risk. And that, of course, it's because of the automatization who will hit the more fragile population. I know that you are very involved in that. What do you recommend? What should be done for that? How can we be sure that the woman can take the opportunity to be there where it can be um, transforming the world and be act of change and not being behind and just be the victims of what somebody else decided for them? What is
Okay,
your receipt?
two things. One, we need to look at the situation as it is. And what we see in pretty much all places around the world is that there is a larger proportion of women employees that are discharging repetitive tasks. You know, the routine, repetitive, easily identifiable, and likely to be breakable tasks. And that is the reason why robotization is actually going to impact women more so than men. That's point number one. That's the reality as we have it. Second reality as we have it, while in many fields, law, medicine, and many others, you have a larger proportion of women graduating from universities and tertiary education. It is not true in sciences and technological fields. You still move around the 25% watermark. So that's the reality we have today. What can we do about it? Number one, the robotization and the elimination of those jobs or massive transformation of those jobs that are at risks have not gone yet. So we still have a bit of time. What it means is that together, companies and policymakers, I think it's a joint responsibility of both the governments and the employers, have the mission and the duty to actually help train, educate, and improve the skill set of those women whose job currently is repetitive, is routine, and is at risk. Point number one. On the 20-ish, 25% of women in sciences, technologies, and all the rest of it, I think we have to take drastic measures in many instances, and they will be different on a country by country basis. But as much as I used to hate quotas when I was young and beautiful, I'm strongly in favor of quotas. Strongly. And I'm strongly in favor of quotas on a very granular basis. We can't just say there will be 20% women, or 40% women, or 50%, or 100% women, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said recently about equality on the Supreme Court of the United States. We have to be super granular, and in those schools, in those tertiary education institutions where sciences are taught, which are regarded as prestigious as a result of either the fact that there are more men than women, God forbid, or because it is regarded as a very high level academic cursus, we must have quotas. There has to be, for a period of time, specific space, numbers available for women so that they do not feel that they will be isolated, they will not be discriminated, they will be encouraged and pushed to go in these directions if they feel like it. In the same vein, I think that pre-kindergarten education, primary educations has to focus on making sure that young girls are equally welcome to the fields of algebra, of those games that actually prepare your brain to being fine with sciences. I was never fine with sciences myself. And today, I think that if I was a young girl, I would welcome anybody who would say, go and study a bit more math, do a bit more physics, and computer engineering might be a good job for you. I think we need to take real steps because tomorrow's world is probably okay for most of us. But the day after tomorrow, I would not want to see many women excluded because simply they have not been educated in those fields. So we need to take drastic measures. not forever, but for a period of time, to bring it up to the level where it will be commonplace to have a woman who is Nobel Prize in physics, or to have a woman who is Nobel Prize in economics, or receiving the Pritzker Prize.
Christine, you will be very happy to know that the Women's Forum, because we are acting, we are now launching a campaign to sensibilize the parents, because when the children are 6, 7 years old, the parents has a lot of influence. And I was the first to say to my daughter,
and vice versa.
And vice versa, to say it's too difficult mathematics, especially in France. In France, you have hard science on one side and humanities on the other side. And of course, girls who like to work on purpose, they choose the humanities because they think that they could be more useful to the society. And in fact, it's not more true. And then we're launching this toolkit that we do with our Daring Circle on STEM and AI to explain to the part which will be the advantages. And I want to share it with you because it's interesting for Mexico too. First, if your daughter choose to be in STEM, she's sure to have a job. Just in the United States, 1,000,004 jobs are available in digital. In the in Europe, there are more than almost 1 million. Secondly, they will be well paid because jobs are well paid. And third, the most important, they get self-esteem, they get self-confidence because, and you have a scientific, you're somebody, you get in authority, you get in you be recognized by the others. And the fourth, you can really work on purpose on what you want to do because it's in being behind the code that you will change the world and be invent the new medicament or the instrument and not being a nurse. And it's a completely swift, and we have to explain to the parent and to the young people too. But let me come.
Can I just mention the reason I said to you vice versa? There's another major threat on the horizon that even central bank governors from around the world, 36 of them today and counting, have identified as a financial stability risk, and that is climate change. Okay? So it's not just this thing that is in our face, it's also a financial stability risk. And as a result, we have to be concerned, even in our formal capacity as IMF. I have seen some amazing experiments in Indonesia where the children are teaching the parents, and whereby, explaining very simply to kids who are 6 or 7 years of age, what is the meaning of throwing a plastic bag in the river? What is the meaning of wasting food? How then go home and tell the parents and actually educate the parents as well. So I think it's a reciprocated relationships. Just as you children make you parents, and hopefully you contribute to the education of your children in the same way, I think they frame you into being different.
I have a last question, the most important one. Christine, you are really a role model for all of us. I would even say that you are an holistic role model because you're a role model in all sectors. You were a role model when you were in sport. You were a role model when you were the first MD in a leading law company worldwide. You were a role model when you decided to come and give back to the community in France and make benefit your experience as Minister of trade before. It's where I met you because you were also in charge of attractiveness. Then, of course, in finance, where you was the first woman minister of finance in the G7 countries during the crisis, of course. And then, of course, now. But what we want to know, you're a really role model, but you still are each day being motivated by something. What motivated you to continue to do things? What you to prove? Because you did everything. You had the first, each time you were somewhere, including in sport, what motivates you and how can you also take the best of yourself each day? Like that would be a really great experience to us to know how can you do it?
Well, I'll confess something. There are quite a few mornings when I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, wouldn't it be nicer to be at home with my children, with my grandchildren, with my darling husband, doing nothing? Okay? So,
that's even more generous.
But I overcome that moment And what actually motivates me, and I'm not cheating, I'm not kidding you here. It's groups of women like you. It's young girls that I meet in all corners of the world, from China to Argentina and everything in between, from north to south, from east to west, who I know are facing tough choices, difficult environment, sometimes violence, not enough education, not enough opportunities, and who I know, because they're telling me, look up to me and say, if you've done it, then maybe I can do it too. And I owe it to them to get up in the morning and do the best job I can to help them.
Christine, thank you so much. You're not only the most powerful woman in the world, you're not only one of the most respected, admired, but I can tell you that you're certainly one of the most loved women in the world. Thank you, Xavier, for permitting me to say that. But really, I think so. And I really would like to again thank you for all the support you constantly bring to the Women's Forum. It's very encouraging for us because it's a lot to do. And I really wanted to thank you in the name of all of us to being with us to launch this new initiative, this new conversation to change the world and to make it better for your grandchildren, my grandchildren, and coming today. Hope so. And and sharing all what you do so wonderful and how much you give back to the community. Thank you so much.